Today, engage residents of Cape Town on the active role men need to play in ending violence against women. This in an effort to educate communities on the affliction of gender-based violence and femicide. The Tavern GBV Dialogues is an awareness campaign spearheaded by the National Liquor Traders. Now to take a look at the role of alcohol as one of the drivers in the perpetration of gender-based violence, we're joined by Aadielah Maker, who is original coordinator of the Southern Africa Alcohol Policy Alliance in South Africa. A very good morning to you, Aadielah, and thanks for making the time. Now, based on research, what links have you found between alcohol and gender-based violence?
Good morning, and thank you for having us. I think that the first thing we want to say is that alcohol is no excuse for gender-based violence. But at the same time, as South Africans, we need to acknowledge that alcohol, harmful drinking of alcohol and gender-based violence are co-occurring epidemics in South Africa. We know that the president has acknowledged that GBV is a problem, but we need the president to also acknowledge that alcohol consumption is a problem. And one of the challenges we have is that despite the fact that only a third of South Africans drink alcohol, of the third of people that drink, 2/3 of them, 60% of them, drink at harmful levels of consumption. And this is a problem because this results in issues like GBV, like road traffic accidents, child neglect. And with the case of GBV, our research has found that when alcohol has been consumed, men are 3 times more likely, more than 3 times more likely, to be perpetrating gender-based violence. And the women, where their partners have had alcohol, is 6 times more likely to experience, to be at the receiving end of violence by their partners. So the research is very clear that there is a link between alcohol and GBV. What we need to acknowledge as a society. Sorry, you wanted to ask?
I was saying that it's, of course, an intersectional conversation where we can also bring in the law just in terms of unlicensed taverns regarding this conversation this morning. Does this exacerbate the situation? What role does this play?
Well, I think that's the key issue in South Africa, right? We have a real problem with unlicensed outlets. If you look at a place like Khayelitsha, the research has shown that only 11% of the over 1,000 outlets in Khayelitsha alone is licensed. And the police is well aware of this. And so our question is, what is it that the police is doing with the information that they have around unlicensed outlets? Because the availability, and this is what I wanted to say earlier on, that the availability of alcohol, and we have particularly in residential areas, like places like Khayelitsha, makes the experience of alcohol-related harm, it increases that. It's not saying that it doesn't happen in Constantia, but because there is such a proliferated availability of alcohol within Khayelitsha, it increases the probability of the occurrence of gender-based violence. And so the question is, how do we get the police to put their voice behind the call for adopting the Liquor Amendment Bill? Since 2017, this bill has been stalled within the parliamentary process, and even though it is mandated by the Department of Trade and Industry to continue with this process, and they've had extensive conversations and dialogues and consultations around this, this bill has not been passed. And so the information that the police has around the availability of alcohol within communities should be used by them to put their weight completely behind adopting this Liquor Amendment Bill. Just as we should be getting the Ministry of Health, who has got a bill on the control of marketing of alcoholic beverages within its department, they should be processing this, because I think that the incidences around Enyobeni, the shooting in Soweto, in Maritzburg, has shown that as a country, we need to be looking at how do we deal with the availability, marketing, and pricing of alcohol. One of the things that South Africans probably don't know is that amongst 50 cities in the world, consecutively for 3 years, we have been voted amongst the top 5 cities, Cape Town and Johannesburg, both cities in the top 5, for having the cheapest alcohol, specifically beer, available. So beer in South Africa is so cheap that people in the world votes it as a place to go to come and have a beer.
Aadielah, when we link alcohol usage to gender-based violence, do we not run the risk of being accused of excusing the very behavior by the perpetrators with the violent behavior?
Well, I mean, that's why I open by saying that from our perspective, we will never as an organization say that alcohol can be used as an excuse for gender-based violence. But alcohol is certainly a driver, a structural issue. The fact that it is so readily available within communities increases the probability of alcohol-related harm, including GBV. But this is within the context that we live in a society where we have poverty, we have got patriarchy, where men do feel that they are more in a position to control women. And we've got a culture of violence, not just men again upon women, but men on men. So all of those factors together increases the probability when you have alcohol available. And we know that even when men drink together and there's no female around, the possibility of violence between them exists. So this is not, for us, the issue is that yes, alcohol increases the probability of GBV being experienced by women, but it's also linked generally to interpersonal violence. Whether or not the man hits the child, whether or not he hits his friend or he stabs his friend because they were drunk and they were having an argument. We live in a country where we do have a culture where people don't resolve differences very easily with words. We very easily go to our fist, go to the nearest bottle, go to the knife, go to the gun. So all of these things is something that we as a country need to be looking at. So, but from our perspective, one of the issues that we should be looking at is reducing the availability of alcohol. We saw during COVID that when alcohol was less available, our trauma units across the country had less incidences coming into the trauma units. Barra, for instance, had a New Year's Eve that they had never experienced before, where there was absolutely no alcohol-related violence coming into the unit, and there was nothing that they had to deal with on that New Year's Eve. So what is it that we need to learn from just our recent history around dealing with the issue of alcohol availability specifically?
Well, time will tell how that latest data will be used by government, but just the fact that we're having our conversation just ahead of that Tavin's alcohol conversations in Khayelitsha, the fact that this initiative is spearheaded by the alcohol industry and the Minister of Police is availing himself for this conversation, is that encouraging? Is that indicative of a new way forward?
Well, I mean, I think that from our perspective, certainly traders do have a role to play. But we need to be careful that the partnerships between government and the traders is not used as a way of reducing the responsibility, both on traders and government, to change how trading happens. We would be interested to hear that the liquor traders come to the party and say that they would be willing to close shop between 10 and 11 at night. Because we know that when they are open past midnight, that increases the probability of violence because people have drunk more alcohol. So it would be interesting to hear what the liquor traders are bringing to the party and what they are committing to communities that they will play a role in trying to reduce how they trade, that they will check IDs of young people, they won't serve children. If we look at what happened in Enyobeni, no 13-year-old should be allowed into the tavern. We should be having the police committing themselves to saying that they will close down any liquor outlet, whether legal or illegal, when there's a complaint from the community. How do we have a complaints mechanism where communities can anonymously provide information about the trading practices? Because we have had feedback from community members that they are scared. They are scared to talk about what's happening in their communities because they are fearful of any comebacks. Because we must acknowledge the economic power and the economic incentive of alcohol trade in communities is a very powerful reason for trying to not act on the bad practices that's currently happening.
Let's thank you again for your time this morning. Aadielah Maker is the regional coordinator of the Southern Africa Alcohol Policy Alliance in South Africa, just talking on that really current conversation in the country about the effects of alcohol, not only on GBV, but on multiple societal challenges.